Hello, I want to welcome you to Summer Observing 5, and today we're going to pick up the Milky Way and some really interesting constellations that are right around the Milky Way and tied together with some of the other stories. Before we get started, just a reminder, there's a Stellarium software that you can use and always apps that you can find things in the night sky for whether you're an Apple or an Android user, it really doesn't matter, or skymaps.com. Go out there, find those, and it will help you find everything we talk about. But let's begin to move in and talk a little bit more about the stories of what we're exploring. So one of the key things that people look for at the night is the Milky Way. And in the summer, it's really prominent. It's hard to miss. And it is a place where you look out and you see all our stars and planets that we see are located in the Milky Way. We do see some other galaxies and things, but usually those require telescopes or binoculars. And in particular, we can see the Andromeda galaxy, but that's an autumn feature and takes a different trip that we would look at. So as you look at this, the one thing I want to draw your attention to is this is a map of the Milky Way galaxy, and there's our sun. And, roughly, if you ask about where we are, we're somewhere 27 to 30,000 light years out from there and from the center. And of course, we're a barred spiral. And if you were actually to measure across this, we were about 200,000 light years across, and anywhere from 100 billion to 400 billion stars, which means if you look at the Milky Way, and this is a picture in the night sky, if you look at it with a pair of binoculars or a telescope, what you will notice are dark areas, which are dark gas clouds, or you're going to notice a very fine sprinkling of stars. If you've never done that, take a pair of binoculars and particularly look over here towards the constellation Sagittarius, which is at the heart of our galaxy and has a lot of rich things that may surprise you. Part of the reason it looks like a hazy disk within a disk is very simply we're inside a disk, and as we look out, all we can see are the arms of the central portion, and so that's why it's sometimes hard to imagine what it is we're looking at. In terms of legends, we've actually talked about a few. Here again is the Milky Way coming across the sky. We mentioned Cygnus is flying along the river Eridanus in honor of that legend, and that's a previous story. Or this is a celestial bridge, which will allow our star Altair to meet the star Vega, which is off the screen in the middle when they're allowed to get together on the 7th day of the 7th month. It may come up. Ours we're going to talk about with the tea kettle here at the steam pot, the steam coming out. Lots of legends that are there, particularly creation legends. And in the Native American, and really looking across many of the tribes, one of the things this is very common is this is a path of the departed that you can find. And little campfires as they make their way across to their new lodges in the afterlife. And as we talked about, it's also Pantheon, burning this when he was coming up. So what we have are a lot of legends, and we've actually talked about several of these in some other sessions that you can go back to. Well, let's get started on our two constellations we're going to add to the summer sky. One of the new ones that we're adding is Sagittarius the Archer, and this is really kind of in the lower part of the southern sky, and we'll show you in the stellarium here in just a moment. But it's a very rich with constellations, objects in this galaxy that you may not be able to see. And if you take binoculars and look around here, you're going to see a lot. A small telescope, you'll see a great number of things. When you look at the Sagittarius, which could be a centaur or a satyr, but it's got the arrow, and this is an important part of the story, most people are able to pick out the asterism, that part you can see called the teapot. And if you look, you can pick out a spout here, you can pick out a handle, a lid, the body, and then out of this spout is coming the steam, which we call the Milky Way. The steam from the tea kettle is leaking out, and some people say, well, that's the Milky Way. There's other ways you can get the Milky Way, but that's one story. In the culture of India, it talks about this as being the lion and this being an elephant, and you may not see that, but that's kind of what you see. But probably the most important of this is this arrow that you see here, and it's pointing at the star Antares in the Scorpion, which is the very heart of the Scorpion, which we will tell a little bit of a legend with in just a bit. So the Scorpio, the scorpion, Scorpio the scorpion, also called Maui's hook, and at its heart is Antares. And Antares is a red supergiant star. It's 12 times the sun size, so we'd put it somewhere between Mars and Jupiter's orbit, 550 light years away. And again, you can follow. It helps you pick it out. The Sagittarius. It's really hard to miss this because of the distinctive hook shape of stars, and it really stands out on the southern horizon, south, southeast, depending on the time of summer that you got to look, because these stars, there's not much to compete, and so they stand out. You may not be able to get the whole hook because we're a little bit too far north, but as you go further south, you can see more. But even peaking above the horizon are these two N stars right here down towards the stinger. And these stars, sometimes people call them the cat's eyes because they just kind of twinkle on the horizon, because as you're going low on the horizon, it does it. Other cultures, though, see this as a series of palm trees, which I guess I could see that. The hatchling goose, where the goose is down here in Java. Some people see it as a ray. You can think stingray, manta ray, but if you can picture a ray around this and its long tail coming up, that almost makes sense. And you're probably seeing a lot of these are things like, wait a second, these are island countries, island people. And that's true. This is more of a southern constellation. And if you go further north, you won't see it at all. And so a lot of the legends here are more relevant to that in the Mediterranean because it doesn't get all that high in the sky. But the one I talk about is Maui's hook. And as you look at this, you can kind of see what indeed looks like Maui's fishhook. And if you watch the Disney show, you may have already figured out, oh yeah, I understand what that is. But to tell you where this legend comes up, and there are a couple different ones. One of them is that Maui was out fishing, and this is a Maori's legend from New Zealand, and he had taken his fish hook and threw it down into the ground, and it was made of the jawbone of his ancestress, and suddenly he felt it lodged in the bottom of the sea, and so he kept pulling and pulling it up, and finally it rushed up to the surface, and it brought up a huge fish island. So it was kind of a fish and an island both, and it was green with grass, and trees were growing everywhere. It was a beautiful area. And so men were hunting and women started cooking on this island. They were there because they were all brought up with it. And Maui warned these people that he brought out of the deep sea onto this beautiful island. He said, don't harm the big fish, because if you do, you're going to ruin the island, or you're going to do something to it. But people said, this is pretty good. It's a big fish. And so they started hacking and cutting it up. And so it gave the coastline, instead of being very smooth, serrated, had fjords or big canyons that were there and little breaks. And finally, they had hacked it up so much that it broke into two islands. And that became the North and South Island of what we now call New Zealand. So this is the legend of how New Zealand was created. And then Maui had pulled things up so hard and so fast because it was stuck on the bottom of the ocean. And he brought it up, and we got two islands, but the hook kept flying away and got stuck in the heavens. So Maui's hook is part of how New Zealand came to be. But the other tale that we're going to tell, so that's a great tale, but the other tale we're going to tell is one of woe, of Artemis, Orion, Apollo, and the Scorpion, and we will tell that one here by going to Stellarium to tell you that story. Okay, so now sorry about the delay there, but anyway, we're resuming our story. Let's go to the night sky, and I'm going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to set it for a little later oops, wrong way. Going to set it for the second week in July, partly because by the time this video is out there, it should do it. But one of the things about this is that these constellations are hard to see initially in early summer. They're more later in the summer. So we'll do that, and we'll set the time back to about 10:45 when we're going to start, and let's take you into the story. So where we're at is, if you look at this, you're probably going, well, I can't see anything. We're looking to the north, but I'm going to go ahead and take us a little bit further over here towards the east initially. And just as a review with the east, we are starting to see at about 10:45 on the 7th of July. I'll flip up the constellation art, And if you look at this, you can see, oh, there's Cygnus the Swan, and we have the Eagle, Aquila, and there's Altair. And you can probably see our famous summer triangle that we had last time. And of course, we have Hercules up in this area and other things that we've shown. But we're going to go a little bit further for our new journey. And we're going to look off towards the kind of towards the southeast, a little bit south. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the star pattern. And if I do that, you can now see the constellations Sagittarius and Scorpius that come up. And the arrow is supposed to be pointing towards Antares, and you can't see it. So the story here is a little bit, I guess we said sad, and you'll understand why. But the Scorpion is up here as punishment, and the Sagittarius, the archer, is here to keep the Scorpion from moving, because if the Scorpion moves, that arrow is going to get it right through the heart, and that's the end of the story for the Scorpion. But it can't do that. So the story goes that the Scorpion, let me start back a little bit, is there's a constellation of Orion. And an Orion is a winter constellation. You can't see it in the summer. But Orion was a great hunter. And Orion bragged about his abilities as a great hunter. And he was challenged by Artemis, who was also known as the Moon, who was a great huntress. And he said, you know, I'm better than you. And she goes, no, you're not better than me. And so they challenged each other and fought all the, did hunting of all the animals and all the rest. But, they started to fall in love. But Artemis, who is the moon, his brother Apollo, who was the sun, said, I don't like this guy. And I'm going to send a giant scorpion to bite him and do him in. And so while Artemis and Orion were out hunting, suddenly this giant scorpion came and was going to attack Orion. And Artemis saw it and said, you know what? I want you to swim away, Orion. Swim. The scorpion will never get you. Keep going. Well, the scorpion, who was sent by Apollo, kept going and actually got in the ocean and followed Orion out there. And Apollo said, I think that scorpion's going to get him. And she goes, oh, no. And so she took her arrow, the great huntress, and shot the arrow, except she missed the scorpion. Her brother misled her, and she ended up getting the arrow into Orion. Now, Orion was mortally wounded and was dying, and so they got him back to shore. And there, Ophiuchus, who is a little north here, very dim constellation, but Ophiuchus, who was a doctor, said, you know what, I think I can try to save him. And of course, he stands right next to the serpens, a snake here, which is also recognized as the caduceus, which you see as part of using with doctors, symbols for doctors still to this day. Well, they got him back. Orion couldn't be saved, and Artemis was so heartbroken. But Jupiter, her father, or Zeus, depending on which legend, he said, Orion wasn't that bad a guy, and so I will put him up in the sky where he can hunt forever. But to punish him, or rather not to punish him, but to punish the scorpion who went to get him, I will put the scorpion in the sky surrounded by my archer Sagittarius, so that the scorpion can never ever again go and get Orion. And if he does, zap, he gets the arrow. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that if you look in the sky, is that Scorpion, and you look at a star map, is directly opposite Orion. And so it works through the seasons that when Scorpion is below the horizon, you can't see it. At that time is the time that you can see Orion. So they're totally separated in the sky in recognition of the punishment for the scorpion. But Orion is there. He can keep hunting. He actually faces off to Taurus the bull. He has a couple hunting dogs with him, so he's a happy guy. Artemis, not so happy. And Sagittarius is forever guarding that scorpion. So take a look at these, and you can see them. And we'll be back in a little while to begin to talk about these objects and other things that move in the night for our next thing. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.